Hashtag the Black Ship, Chapter 45, Part 9b. Stay out of Wyatt's way. The black ship groaned as it cut through the dense fog, its hull creaking under the strain of uncharted waters. The crew moved in grim silence, their nerves taut like a bowstring. The air was thick, heavy with the promise of conflict. Wyatt stood at the bow, his cloak whipping in the wind, his hand resting on the hilt of his cutlass. He was a man transformed. The jovial navigator and occasional troublemaker the crew once knew was gone, replaced by a figure of resolute fury. Rumors of betrayal had reached his ears, whispers that someone aboard was leaking information to the Crimson Armada, the black ship's sworn enemy. "Wyatt," Captain Alira called from the quarterdeck, her voice firm but laced with concern. "You find them, you bring them to me, alive." Wyatt didn't respond, he only nodded, his dark eyes scanning the deck as though he could see through flesh and bone into the hearts of men. The first confrontation came in the galley. A young deckhand, jittery and pale, accidentally knocked over a barrel of salt. Wyatt was on him in an instant, gripping the boy's collar and slamming him against the bulkhead. "Who are you working for?" Wyatt hissed, his voice low and venomous. I don't know what you're talking about," the boy stammered, eyes wide with terror. Wyatt released him with a shove, the boy crumpling to the floor in a heap. "If you're innocent, stay out of my way," Wyatt warned. "If not, pray I don't find out." The crew gave Wyatt a wide berth after that. He stalked the ship like a shadow, appearing suddenly in doorways and behind cargo crates, his presence unsettling and unrelenting. By nightfall, Wyatt had cornered another suspect, a grizzled sailor named Torv, who was known for his loose tongue and dice games. "You've been spending a lot of time in the port taverns," Wyatt said, his cutlass glinting in the dim lantern light. "That's not a crime," Torv growled, but his hands trembled as they hovered near the dagger at his belt. "No, but selling us out to the Crimson Armada is." Wyatt's cutlass flashed as he disarmed Torv with a single, precise strike. The dagger clattered to the deck, and Torv froze. "You've got one chance," Wyatt said, his voice ice cold. "Confess, and I might let the captain decide your fate. Lie, and you'll answer to me." Torv hesitated, his defiance crumbling under the weight of Wyatt's unyielding stare. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered, his voice barely audible. "They promised me gold, just to pass along little things, nothing important." "Nothing important?" Wyatt's voice rose, fury igniting in his chest. "We've lost lives because of your little things." Torv flinched, but Wyatt didn't strike. Instead, he hauled the man to his feet and dragged him toward the captain's quarters, his grip like iron. When they reached the door, Captain Alira was waiting, her sharp eyes flicked from Wyatt to Torv, and she nodded once. "Lock him in the brig," she ordered. "We'll deal with him after we've dealt with the Armada." Wyatt didn't move right away, his jaw clenched, and for a moment, it seemed as though he might defy the captain's command. But then, with a sharp nod, he hauled Torv away without a word. As Wyatt disappeared into the shadows, the crew whispered among themselves. "Don't get in his way," one of them muttered. "He's not the same man anymore." Above them, the black ship sailed on, its crew bound for a storm far greater than the one brewing in Wyatt's heart. Hashtag the Black Ship, Chapter 45, Part 9. See the Crimson Shadow. Wyatt dumped Torv into the brig with a force that rattled the iron bars. The traitor groaned, clutching his shoulder, but Wyatt didn't spare him a glance. He slammed the cell door shut and turned to leave, his boots echoing against the cold, damp stone of the ship's lower deck. The black ship wasn't just any vessel, it was alive in a way that unsettled even its most seasoned crew. The walls seemed to shift when no one was looking, and the air held a faint hum, as if the ship itself were listening. Wyatt paused, his instincts prickling. He could feel it too, the presence of something unseen, watching him. "Wyatt." The whisper was faint, but it stopped him in his tracks. He turned sharply, scanning the empty corridor. Nothing but shadows greeted him. His grip tightened on the hilt of his cutlass. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, the whisper came again, this time closer. "Beware the shadow, Wyatt." Wyatt's pulse quickened. He knew better than to ignore warnings aboard the black ship. The vessel was filled with secrets, some of which had claimed the lives of men braver than him, but there was no time to dwell on ghostly riddles. The Crimson Armada was close, and the ship needed every able-bodied man to defend it. He ascended the stairs back to the deck, where the crew was already preparing for battle. Cannons were being loaded, ropes secured, and weapons sharpened. The fog had thinned, revealing the faint outline of sails on the horizon, red sails. "They're here," growled First Mate Kale, his scarred face grim. Captain Alira stood at the helm, her dark hair whipping in the wind. "All hands to battle stations," she barked. "We hold them here, or we don't hold them at all." Wyatt joined the ranks, his cutlass gleaming in the pale moonlight. He could feel the crew's unease, their eyes flickering to him as if hoping for reassurance. But Wyatt had none to give. His focus was on one thing, vengeance. The Crimson Armada had taken too much from him, friends, comrades, and his own peace of mind. Tonight, He would make them pay. The black ship shuddered as the first cannonball struck its side, a warning shot from the Armada's flagship. Wyatt exchanged a look with Cale, who nodded grimly. "Let's give them an answer," Wyatt said, his voice cold and sharp as the blade in his hand. Cale roared the order, and the black ship's cannons roared back. The battle began in earnest, the air filling with smoke, fire, and the clash of steel. Wyatt fought like a man possessed, cutting down enemy boarders with ruthless precision. But as the battle raged, Wyatt felt it again, that eerie presence, lingering just beyond his sight. He turned in time to see a shadow flit across the deck, moving impossibly fast. "Wyatt," a voice called. It was Alira, her tone sharp with warning. He spun around just as a figure emerged from the smoke, a Crimson Armada assassin, clad in black and armed with twin daggers. The assassin lunged, their movements unnaturally fluid, as if guided by something inhuman. Wyatt parried the first strike, the force of the blow rattling up his arm. This was no ordinary opponent. The assassin's eyes glinted red, and their movements defied logic, slipping through Wyatt's defenses like water. The whispers returned, louder now, echoing in Wyatt's mind. "Beware the shadow, it's already here." Wyatt gritted his teeth, shoving the voice aside. He focused on the fight, his instincts taking over. The assassin moved to strike again, but this time, Wyatt was ready. He feinted left, then drove his cutlass forward, piercing the assassin's side. The figure staggered, their red eyes dimming, but instead of collapsing, they dissolved into smoke, disappearing into the wind. Wyatt stumbled back, his breath ragged, his heart pounding. "What in the void was that?" Cale asked, appearing at his side. "I don't know," Wyatt admitted, his voice low, "but it's not over." Above them, the Crimson Armada's flagship loomed closer, its red sails glowing like embers against the night, and somewhere in the shadows, something far more dangerous than an assassin was watching, waiting for its moment to strike. Wyatt tightened his grip on his cutlass. He didn't know what was coming, but one thing was certain, he wasn't backing down. The Black Ship, Chapter 45, Part 9D. Into the fire. The black ship rocked violently as another cannonball struck its side, splinters flying through the air. Wyatt barely had time to regain his footing before he was thrown into the thick of battle again. Crimson Armada soldiers swarmed the deck, their blades flashing in the chaos. "Hold the line." Captain Alira's voice cut through the cacophony, rallying the crew. Wyatt didn't need the command. His cutlass flashed as he deflected a strike aimed at Cale, pivoting to slash through the attacker's armor. Blood sprayed across the deck, but there was no time to flinch. Another soldier charged, and Wyatt met him with unrelenting force. Cale, fighting at Wyatt's side, grunted, "They're throwing everything at us. How long can we hold?" "As long as we need to," Wyatt growled, his eyes blazing. The ship's cannons thundered again, but the Crimson Armada was relentless. Their flagship loomed closer, its deck bristling with soldiers and weapons. The red sails glowed ominously in the moonlight, a stark contrast to the dark, battered black ship. Suddenly, a deafening crack split the air. Wyatt turned to see the black ship's main mast splintering under the impact of a direct hit. The mast groaned and toppled, crushing part of the deck below. "Wyatt," Alira shouted from the helm, "get to the lower hold, protect the powder stores. If they blow, we're done for." Wyatt nodded and sprinted toward the hatch. Below deck, the air was thick with smoke and the acrid smell of gunpowder. Crew members scrambled to put out small fires, their faces pale with fear. As Wyatt reached the hold, he froze. The shadow was there. It wasn't the assassin from before, this was something else entirely. A swirling mass of darkness hovered near the barrels of powder, its form shifting and writhing like a living thing. Red eyes flickered within the void, locking onto Wyatt as he entered. "Stay back," Wyatt barked, raising his cutlass. The shadow moved, faster than anything he'd ever seen. It darted toward him, its form splitting into tendrils that lashed out like whips. Wyatt ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the attack. "Fight it, Wyatt," the voice was in his head again, louder this time, almost deafening. "Shut up," Wyatt snarled, slashing at the tendrils. His blade passed through the shadow harmlessly, and it coiled around him, tightening like a noose. He gasped for air, his vision darkening. The whispers grew louder, overlapping and chaotic. Images flashed through his mind, memories of friends lost, battles fought, and mistakes that haunted him. "No," Wyatt growled, summoning every ounce of willpower. "You won't take me." The shadow hesitated, its grip faltering. Wyatt seized the moment. With a roar, he lunged for a lantern hanging on the wall. He grabbed it and hurled it at the shadow. The glass shattered, and fire erupted. The shadow shrieked, its form writhing violently before retreating into the darkness. Wyatt stumbled back, coughing from the smoke, his chest heaving. The powder stores were safe, for now, but the shadow wasn't gone. Wyatt turned and sprinted back to the deck. The battle raged on, but something was different. The Crimson Armada soldiers were falling back, their assault faltering. Cale ran up to him, Blood streaked across his face. They're retreating, look. Wyatt followed his gaze to the flagship. Its sails were burning, flames licking up the mast. The black ship's cannons had struck a decisive blow. Don't stop, Elira bellowed. Finish them. The crew roared in unison, pouring everything they had into the final assault. Cannonballs tore through the enemy's hull, and the Crimson Armada's flagship began to list to one side, its deck in chaos. Wyatt felt a flicker of hope, but it was fleeting. He could still feel the presence of the shadow, lingering on the edges of his perception. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the Crimson Armada's flagship sank into the depths, Wyatt gripped the railing, staring into the churning sea. Whatever had attacked him in the hold wasn't just some trick of the Armada. It was something older, darker, and it was still out there, waiting. Wyatt, Elira said, coming to stand beside him. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her worry. We won today, but I need to know, what happened below deck? Wyatt didn't answer right away. He looked at her, his expression grim. Something's hunting us, he said finally, and it's not done yet. Elira nodded, her jaw tightening. Then we'd better be ready. The black ship sailed on, battered but unbroken, into the night, and somewhere in the shadows, the enemy waited.